Good morning, everybody. My name is Greg Barnes, and I'm the Sales and Marketing Manager for Horner Express Worldwide. We'd like to welcome all of our international customers. We're very excited to do this webinar. AutoPilot have come up with some awesome products of late, and this would be an hour of we'll go through the new products. At the end, there will be some time for some questions and answers. So please hang around until the end. So Sean Assam will be hosting the webinar today. Sean has been with our company for 20 years now, but he's been in the industry for about 38 years. He's currently the National Accounts and Commercial Products Manager for Aquacel and AutoPilot. And I know many of you would have recognized him from bumping into him at some of the trade shows. He's always there, giving some lectures and some training. And he's also a Florida Continuing Education approved instructor as well. Sean's been involved in all aspects of Aquacel and AutoPilot, customer service, field support, research and development, and sales, of course. And he's also done some international travel for us here and there as well. So without any further ado, let's turn it over to Sean.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. During the presentation, if you do have any questions, please go ahead and go to the chat or the Q&A and submit your questions there, and we will address those questions, okay? So again, my name is Sean Assam. I'm with Aquacel AutoPilot. We're going to go over some of the changes that we've made, some of the improvements that we've made, and go into some of the new products that we're coming out with this year also. So on the slide presentation, we're just going to go through some of the different things that you've seen in the past. Let's see. All right, so a little bit of the history of AutoPilot. You can see on the slide right there, there are a bunch of different systems that we've produced in the past. On the bottom right corner in the middle, you can see the ChlorSync, which is the latest unit that we've released years ago. But if you look at the top row, a majority of our systems would have this patented manifold design that's worked very well for us. And when we moved to the ChlorSync unit with the triangular shaped cell, we were getting a couple of issues with that, where some of our features weren't as apparent as the manifold design. So we took the feedback from a lot of our customers and looked at our system and decided to come out with a hybrid unit. If you look at the right side, which is right over here, the ChlorSync Generation 2 or Gen 2 is kind of changing the design of the ChlorSync unit to the old system of the manifold design. So one of the things that we have to look at in every salt system, there's going to be a power center, there's going to be a cell, and there's going to be some kind of flow protection. Every salt system has to have these three components. Now, the way that we do it, and we do it differently, is that we take advantage of those three components. As you see here in the ChlorSync system, all right, we've had a very reliable power center. We've had a very reliable display, but located on the cell, it seemed to be a little more tedious, a little more problematic for us. So we're going away from the ChlorSync cell design and moving that display over to the power center. Okay, so what this does for us, it gives us, like I said, a very reliable power center, very reliable display that's now mounted on the cell itself. Okay, so we've taken that component of the display being on the cell and moved it over to the power center. If you look on the bottom right corner, that's the inverted diagram of the bottom of the power supply, and you can see down here where we had the manifold design, we're going back to the cell connection directly into the power supply by way of banana connectors, banana plugs. And there's the tri-sensor connector that's going to be on the power center also. Okay, so there's a question up there. Let me see if I can pull that up. Okay, got it.
Let me see, Sean, now that you give us the option to ask questions. Jeremias has his hand raised. I don't know if he has a question. Jeremias, good morning.
Yes, good morning. What happens? I was trying to see why we couldn't access the chat. That's why I had raised my hand. No?
Say it one more time. I'm sorry.
I had raised my hand because I couldn't send a chat, and I would have some question along the way. So I just wanted to make sure that I could ask my question.
Oh,
Okay,
yes.
yeah. If
You
you
will
raise your
be.
hand, yeah, we can address it that way also.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
All right. So as you can see that we've switched the power supply. Now this is going to be what the new ChlorSync Gen 2 is going to be as for right now. It's a hybrid system, as you can see, the best of both worlds. We've got the best manifold design, and I'll talk about the benefits and advantages of the manifold design. And we've got a very reliable power center with the display mounted on it right now. All right, so it incorporates the best of the new ChlorSync Gen 2 power center and the proven manifold assembly. The new Gen 2 power center will be integratable with the pool sink and the chem sink, and I'll describe those later on also. But that power center will replace. Okay, so there's the pool sink, which is our Wi-Fi antenna. This is our chem sink, which is our chemical automation, which has ORP and pH technology built into it. All right, so we can automate the chlorine generation and the control of the pH level by feeding acid into the system automatically. All right, so as far as like the older systems, that Gen 2 will replace the Nano Plus, the Soft Touch, and the digital power supplies. So any of those projects that you've got in the field already, if there are any issues with it, we can replace it with the new Gen 2 power center. Okay. Now, one of the things that we're doing is Gen 2 version 2, we will be moving that display from the side to the front, so it looks similar to this. This is not the final version yet, but I would anticipate after summer is when this will be released, but it'll be a little more continuous display and design onto the power center. All right, so the only other thing that's going to change is the cell cord will be specifically the banana plug connector. These will come with the power center, so you don't have to worry about if you're upgrading Soft Touch or the Nano or the 75003s out in the field. All right, it will be compatible and will be available with the correct cell cord. All right. So there's a couple chat questions.
No, I am checking that the chat is allowed for everyone. You can go ahead and continue in the meantime.
Thanks, ma'am. All right, so the next one is the manifold assembly. Like I talked about before, the manifold assembly has been a design that we've been using since about 2005. And what the manifold assembly does, it's different from every other salt system that you see out there, is that we're controlling the flow that's going through the cell. If you look at the diagram on the screen, on the bottom of it, there's a spring check valve, so that when the water flows in from the left, that check valve is going to divert some of the water flow up through the cell, up through the tri-sensor. And what we're doing with this is that by slowing the water flow through the cell, we can treat the water much more effectively. It's similar to an ozone generator. The more contact time you have with ozone, the more effective it is. So with our manifold design, by slowing the water flow going through the cell, we have more contact time with the water, so that can treat the water much more effectively. As you can see in the bullet point over here, as the water is passing through the manifold or through the cell, it's reaching breakpoint chlorination within the cell body. So what that means is that we have a very good chance of destroying all the chloramines that's passing through the system as it's with our manifold design. All right, so chloramines we recognize as that strong chlorine smell, which causes the burning red eyes and the chlorine odor, and a lot of the negative effects of chlorine are blamed on chlorine, or chloramines rather. The negative effects of chloramines are typically blamed on chlorine. All right, so we want to make sure that you understand that we're able to treat the water much more effectively with the manifold design. Another component of that manifold design is the tri-sensor assembly. This is pretty unique to the AutoPilot system. in that we've got a flow sensor. As I described before, we've got a power center, we've got a cell, and we've got a flow detection device. With our flow sensor, which is the first component of the tri-sensor, we're making sure that we have enough flow going through the cell to evacuate the gases and the chlorine that's being generated within the cell body. All right, so it also provides us a safety cutoff if there's not enough flow going through there. We're measuring the flow and not pressure. Like some systems will give you a pressure switch, we give you a flow switch. The second sensor on there is a salt sensor. The salt sensor is reading the salt level in parts per million. On the display itself, you can access the diagnostics, which will give you the salt level in parts per million. So it will show you how many parts per million there are in the body of water. Now, if you use this in conjunction with the ChlorSync, which is the Wi-Fi app, not only will it show you the parts per million on the phone app, it will show you how much salt is needed to maintain 3,500 parts per million. That'll calculate it for you. So it automatically shows you now when you start reading below 2,700 parts per million, it's giving you a warning light. And like I said, the ChlorSync app will show you how much salt you need to put back in. All right, so you got the flow switch, you've got the salt sensor, and the last sensor is the temperature sensor. We do something very unique with the temperature sensor. It's a patented temperature sensor, temperature compensation feature. And what that does is we know that when the water temperature increases, your chlorine demand increases also. When the water temperature gets cooler, your chlorine demand decreases. So as a result, our power supply recognizes what the temperature is, and when it gets warmer, will increase the chlorine output automatically. On the other side, when it starts getting colder, it will decrease it automatically as well. Now, in areas that may get colder than 55 to 60 degrees, there are a lot of salt systems that will typically shut off. All right. Our system is one of the very few that will not shut off when it starts getting too cold. As a result of the temperature compensation feature, we start reducing the output, and when it gets to around 55 degrees, it'll go to 1% output. It will stay at 1% output. Anything colder than 1%, it will not be able to adjust higher than that, but it does pulsate a little bit of chlorine, even if it's cold water out. So if you're circulating water, we will still continue generating chlorine. Okay. It gives you accurate temperature readings on the unit itself, and it will operate, like I said, below 50 degrees Fahrenheit. All right. So let's sizing recommendations. If we look at the top row, which are the older systems that we used to manufacture, the Nano Plus, we see the PPC1 and the PPC2 cell, which is a 5-blade and 6 blades. We're the only ones that's offered with the Nano was a 5-blade, Nano Plus was a 6-blade, and you can see the output. Now, when we go to the soft touch or the digital or the model 75003, you can see that we use the PPC1, 3, 4, and 5 blades with those models, and you can see the corresponding chlorine output of each unit. All right. As far as the recommended gallons for the PPC1 was a 40,000. PPC3, 50,000, PPC4, 60, and PPC5, 80,000. Now, when we get to, let me jump in the bottom here, the Gen 1 ChlorSync, the CS30 was producing 1.1 pounds per day, CS40, 1.4, CS50 is 1.7. When we go to the Gen 2, you can see that we're making a little bit less chlorine on the PPC1 and the PPC2, PPC3, but we can operate, or 3 and 4, but we can't operate the PPC5. And what this really corresponds to is that we're able to manage all the different cells that we've manufactured in the past. So like I mentioned before, the Gen 2 power supply can replace any of our previous power centers, the Nano Plus, Soft Touch, Digital 75003. All right, so it's a very versatile. It will not work with the CS30, 40, and 50 cells, all right, because it does not connect to those three, okay? And one of the questions might be, well, if we're still working with, the different power supplies actually the same power supply that displays on the Gen 2. Why is, like, in this instance, the 1.0 pounds per day versus 1.1 pounds per day? Well, as you can see on the CS30, we actually had 7 blades in that system, all right? Whereas the PPC1, we have 5 blades. And what that corresponds to is the more blades that we have in a cell, the more chlorine we can produce, as evident by this, okay? So nothing of concern. We would still recommend that PPC1 or the CS30 on a 30,000 gallon pool, okay? Let's see, next slide. All right, so the other model that we are introducing this year also is the ChlorSync, which is a water chemistry controller. Now, the water chemistry controller, if you look at the diagram, we've got a chemical or an acid pump directly built onto the ChlorSync power center. On the inside of it, we do have ORP and pH sensors on the inside. There's an acrylic flow cell is what this is called, where the water sample comes in. We test the water, and then the water sample goes back out, okay? Here's a chemical pump on the side here. The ChlorSync system also comes with a 5-gallon acid tank. You can use a diluted acid solution in there to feed. And it's a very nice way to automate your system, because basically what it does, like I said, it will feed chlorine and it will feed acid on demand based on your assigned set points, okay? And the ChlorSync unit, it replaces the older total control system. And it works in conjunction with the ChlorSync and Gen 2. All right, so the ChlorSync is compatible with any of our new systems now. And with the ChlorSync, you must use the pool sync, because that's where your control for the ORP and the pH are. Okay. All right, so on questions and answer, when sizing the correct size, do we size based on gallons or bather load? Any rule of thumb if you don't have an idea on the bather load? All right, so my recommendation, let me go back to that slide again, and that's a good question. All right. All right, so when we looked at this sizing chart, these are the cells that we're going to be dealing with right now, and these are the gallon equivalency that they would correspond to. On the bottom, always oversize the cell. That's my recommendation. If we look at these gallons rating, the gallon ratings are based on 100% output, ideal conditions, 24-hour pump runtime. And we know that most systems are not running under those conditions, all right? So it basically means that we need to make sure that, our operating conditions are ideal, but always oversize the cell. There's another advantage to oversizing the cell as well. One of the effects that we are very familiar with chlorine generation system is the pH tends to rise. When the pH tends to rise, there's a chance for calcium scale to develop on the cell. All right. The fact of the matter is that pH rise is greatly dependent on how often the cell is activated. So the higher the percentage that you're running the cell at, the more chance there is for that pH to rise. When you oversize a cell, that allows you to run at a lower percentage output, which means the pH does not rise as much, okay? The other benefit to oversizing the cell is that you're going to have longer cell life as a result of having a larger cell on there. All right, but if you don't know what the bather load is, it's always good to, look at the looking at the gallons that we recommend. And if you're running 12 hours a day, for instance, that 30,000 gallon cell may be good for 15,000 gallons instead. Okay, so just look at it that way instead. All right.
Sean, there's other questions now that you're answering questions.
Okay.
First question is it possible that the ChlorSync works alone without being linked to another equipment?
No, the ChlorSync must be connected to the ChlorSync or the ChlorSync Gen 2 for it to communicate with the system. All right, because you've got to have a brain to the system. The ChlorSync is just looking and testing the ORP and pH. It's got the chemical pump to feed acid when it needs to, but then it sends all that information back to the ChlorSync power supply.
Okay, great. That was for Edwin Vives. So Edwin, let us know if that answered your question. Carson asks, ChemSync can only be used with generation 2, but not generation 1, correct?
It can work with both.
Both.
It will work
Okay.
with, yes.
David asks, with the ChemSync, will the acid feed into the manifold like the total control, or will it tap into return line?
With ink and the Gen 2, the ideal location is to return the acid into the manifold before the cell. Let me see if I have that picture. All right, so I'll jump back in the slides, but in this diagram, what you see is from the acid feed pump, we're going to feed right into the manifold assembly. And by injecting it in the manifold before it gets to the cell, we have a much better chance at two things. The first thing is we have a much better chance of making sure the cell doesn't scale up by feeding the acid there. The other benefit that we have to feeding acid into the manifold is we know that with lower pH levels, chlorine strength is increased, or the hypochlorous acid is stronger with lower pH. So when we feed the acid into the manifold before the cell, we're actually boosting the strength of the chlorine that's being manufactured as well. All right, so there's a couple of benefits to doing it that way. Now, when we look at the older ChlorSync system with the old cell, we're still injecting the acid solution in the return line before the cell so that it still has that benefit of, descaling the cell and stronger chlorine strength coming out of the cell. All right, so in either application, it will be fed before the cell. All right.
All right. I'm trying to translate. Edwin is asking or commenting. So it's not necessary that it's working with a ChlorSync. The question is because when the pH fails, it also stops the production of chlorine, and the control over the pH is over the pH and not over the chlorination. This problem is brought also from the AutoPilot total control. I don't know if I made myself clear. Can you comment on that, Sean?
Well, you're controlling the two different aspects through the ChemSync. One is the ORP, the other one's the pH. If the ORP fails in some manner, in other words, if the acid pump isn't working, or if your 5-gallon tank is out of solution, you will get a notification on the ChlorSync app to let you know that the acid pump is feeding and feeding and feeding, and the pH isn't going anywhere. All right, but that should not prevent the chlorine side of the ORP side from continuing to operate. Okay, I think on the total control system there was like a hierarchy, so that if this section didn't work, it also shut down the other side. But the ChemSync is going to be a little different, where it's got its independence on both the ORP and the pH. All right, I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, I will. Edwin, let us know if that answers your question. There's another question from JR. It says, injecting before the cell doesn't reduce the cell life as well as cleaning it?
Well, the worst condition for a cell is to let it get scaled up. All right, so if we inject the acid before the cell, it does not impact the cell life at all. It'll enhance it simply because we're keeping the scale off of it. All right, so that's one reason why. The other part of it is that, again, when we can run it at a lower output percentage, or in this case with the ORP controller, it's only going to activate the cell when it calls for a chlorine demand. Your cell is going to last longer as well. All right, but yeah, ideally by injecting before the cell, you're impacting the cell life by increasing the cell life, but also preventing that scale from building up.
Sounds good. I see thumbs up. You can go ahead, Sean.
Okay, all right. Okay, so ChemSync features, ORP and Peach monitoring and control. You assign the set point for both of those areas, and the unit will take over from there. It receives power. The ChemSync receives power from the ChlorSync power center. So again, to go back to that question, can it work alone? No, it's got to receive power from the ChlorSync, and it's got to communicate with the ChlorSync. All right. 12-volt standard pump is included. 5-gallon acid tank is included, which is an outdoor rated tank. Pool sink ready so that it will communicate and must communicate with the pool sink to be able to control the ChemSync system. Simple installation and service, auxiliary control output. And auxiliary control output is basically if you've got a project that has an existing acid feed pump, a Stenner pump, we can connect to 110 volts and work that way instead of using the 12-volt Stenner pump. Okay. Again, this is the internal diagram of the ChemSync system. Top corner, you've got the electronic circuit board that the ORP and the pH sensors plug into. On the bottom here, you've got the flow cell that the water goes into. Water sample port in the middle so that if you want to test the water, it's best to test it right here so that you have a good example of what these sensors are reading. Okay, rather than testing it at the pool where it could be different from what the sensors are reading, you can test it at this port instead. Okay. Again, this is a diagram of an installation. You've got your pump filter and then your heat pump, and then it goes back to the pool. In this case, you've got the ChlorSync, the ChemSync system with all the sensors, and your acid pump that's feeding from the acid tank. All right, so it's a really easy installation to where on the water sample, we want to take a water sample from the manifold or anywhere after filtration and before any kind of chemical introduction. That's where we're going to take the water sample. In our manifold, there's a label that actually invites you to drill right into this point here to put your sample feed tube. On the other side, the sample feed discharge will go to the suction side of the pump so that we've always got a nice clean flow of water that's going through the system to be tested. That's testing the pool water after it's filtered before chemicals are injected. All right.
Now that you're talking about acid, I think Jeremias is asking if those excessive use of muriatic acid damage the cell.
No, not at all. It will not impact the cell. Okay. Okay, so the next component as part of either the ChlorSync as a chlorine generator by itself or in conjunction with a ChemSync is PoolSync Wi-Fi controller. The PoolSync comes with a phone app that it's free. There's no annual fees, but what it does, it allows you to connect to the internet or to your Wi-Fi, and it will work with our ChlorSync Gen 1 and Gen 2. It has to be used when you're using the ChemSync system, and it will work with our AquaCal heat pumps as well through the homeowner's Wi-Fi system. Now, on the PoolSync antenna, we do have a built-in amplifier in there so that if there's generally a weak signal by the equipment, that amplifier will increase the Wi-Fi strength so that we can get a nice strong signal. The other thing too is that we can run about 20 feet of cable away from the equipment. So if you need to move that antenna around, you are capable of relocating it to a stronger Wi-Fi area. When the Gen 2 version 2 power center comes out, we should be introducing a new PoolSync antenna as well that allows you to attach a much longer cable if you need to run that antenna even closer to the Wi-Fi modem to get a strong signal. All right, so that'll be something in the future that we can do as well. Remote access and control for the pool owner so that they can be anywhere in the world and access what's going on with their system. They can look at their ChlorSync output. They can look at the ChemSync, ORP, and pH. They can see how much acid is still remaining in the acid tank. If they've got the AquaCal heat pump, they can adjust temperatures on the AquaCal heat pump. They can switch from heat and cool. We've got full control over all of our with the PoolSync app. For service access, if the homeowner doesn't want to give you access to their Wi-Fi, you are able to go into the service mode. As you can see on the antenna, there's a service mode button on there that allows you remote access if you're staying in the unit itself. So when you download the PoolSync app to your phone and you're standing in front of the unit, you go into service mode and you can see everything that the homeowner can see on their phone. All right. You are able to program it as well from that service access. All right. The PoolSync is recommended to be constantly energized so that it's always communicating to Wi-Fi. Features or the benefits of doing it this way is that if there are any software or firmware updates, it's live updates that's sent over the air, and it does not require the homeowner to do anything to be able to update their software. All right. So on your Google store, your Android store, you just look at PoolSync. This is what it looks like. You can download it. Like I said, it's a free app, and it will connect. Now, there's a couple of steps that you have to go through to connect the PoolSync antenna on the job with the PoolSync app for that particular customer. All right. But once you've done that, it's fairly easy. Here's some of the screens, and I'll go into a little more detail on the scenes, but it gives you, let me see here. Okay. So it gives you a kind of a desktop so that in this one, here's the PoolSync. It also goes into the other equipment that may be installed, such as ChlorSync and the heat. So when we get into like the ChlorSync and the heat pump buttons, it gives you a more advanced screen. But on your desktop screen, it shows you here that the flow is on. It's sufficient flow. Water temperature 77 degrees. And in this case, the salt level is at a good level between the good range. All right. So it does give you a low and a high graph as well if it falls into those ranges. Okay. So this is a quick dashboard view of what's going on with whatever's connected to the system itself. All right. So advanced functionality on the top corner of the ChlorSync screen. Let's look here. We've got salt level in parts per million. Flow is good. Cell life is 100%. As the cell starts to get power, it will count down how much what life is remaining. So that's different from in the past where you've kind of had to guess based on the amps and volts of the cell as to whether it needs to be replaced or not. In this case, we're counting down the hours of operation on the cell. All cells are rated on approximately 8,000 to 10,000 operating hours of life. Okay, so now we've got a good idea of the cell life remaining, so that it makes it very proactive to know when that cell needs to be replaced. All right. The other screen that we have here, or the other functions that we have here, is a 24-hour boost mode. When you press that button or slide it over, it'll go to 24-hour boost operation. So it will increase the output to 100% for the next 24 hours of operation. Okay. To change it, the output on the unit on the screen, you can press the up button or the down button to change that percentage, or you can touch that and drag it to increase it or to decrease the output itself. Anything that's changed on the PoolSync app itself will be reflected on the ChlorSync Power Center, so that if I change the percentage, the Power Center will also show the percentage change as well. All right. The advanced functionality is those three buttons at the top will get you to the diagnostics. On the diagnostic screen, here's what we're able to see. Salt level, if it's low, like I said, it will tell you how much salt to add. You have to program gallons of water for me to be able to calculate how much salt is needed when it starts getting low. All right. Reverse time is programmable. It's factory set for 4 hours. You can reduce it to 3 hours or increase it to 5 hours. Now, the only time that you really want to change that reverse time is if your water chemistry is spot on, and when I talk about spot on, I'm talking about testing and adjusting your water chemistry constantly to make sure that it's balanced to the saturation index, all right, the Langler saturation index. If your water chemistry is balanced by going to a 3-hour, or I'm sorry, let me reverse that. By going to a 5-hour reverse, if you're dealing with balanced water, you can actually extend the life of the cell a little bit more, okay? If you get into a condition where your LSI, your Langler saturation index, is scale forming, or you're seeing the cell scale up constantly, you can reduce it to a 3-hour reversal, which means it's reversing more frequently. And what that means is the polarity direction, the positive and negative charge to the cell is going to flip from negative to positive, positive to negative more frequently than the factory 4-hour setting. And that will help keep the cells cleaner for any kind of scaling situation, okay? But 4 hours is the ideal setting. Again, if you're keeping an eye on your saturation all the time, going to 5 hours will extend the life of the cell. For areas that use automatic covers, we do have an automatic cover connection and control. And what that means is when you've got a covered pool, little chlorine demand. So by connecting to our cover control, our output will recognize when the cover is closed and decrease it to 20% of your normal setting. Okay. The rest of the information down here, the cell model, so it'll connected to the cell serial number. And there's another further screen. When you tap on the cell model number 5 times, it'll open up another screen that shows you the cell amps and volts. Okay. I can see that we have a couple of questions.
Yes, I don't know if we answered already Jorge's question about what would cause to fail, the cell to fail. I think you explained some of that.
Yeah, the cause of the cell failure, one of all, first, it has a finite life. So when it goes through the 8,000 hours of operating, it's time to replace the cell. Allowing it to scale up will prematurely fail that cell. Okay, so instead of getting 8,000 hours, you're going to get less than 8,000 hours if you allow that cell to scale up without maintaining it or descaling it or cleaning the cell. Okay. The other way that the cell can prematurely fail is if you're operating under low salt levels at all times. So you're constantly running low salt, and it'll still operate. That low salt causes the power supply to have to send more power to the cell, and the more power to the cell causes that premature failure on the cell. All right, so those are the 3 main areas that the cell fails. Another area that you can greatly damage the cell and prematurely fail, if the cell needs to be scaled or descaled, do not use anything metallic to scrape that scale off of it. Don't use a screwdriver or hacksaw blade or anything like that, because anything metallic can scrape the cell and prematurely fail that cell. All right, so if it needs to be cleaned, just use your garden hose to spray off as much as you can, and then soak it with a combination of acid and water. Okay. Any other questions?
Yes, there's another question. I'm going to translate. It says, if you shorten the inversion time, will that damage the cell?
Well, again, the reason that you change from the 4 hours to the 3 hours is because you're having a scale cell situation. All right. In a scale cell situation, the first thing I recommend is to test your saturation index to see what's going on with the water chemistry. All right. If your water chemistry is out of balance, get your water chemistry in balance, and that should take care of the scaling. All right. So that you can leave it at 4 hours. Now, in some areas where you're constantly dealing with hard water situations, or your water supply is high in alkalinity, high in calcium, high in pH, where it's very difficult to maintain the saturation index, that may be one of the reasons why you see the cell scaling up frequently. Reversing it or changing it to the 3-hour reversal will help keep some of that scale off of it. Okay.
All right. Jeremias also has a question. He says, the higher the working percentage of chlorine, does it shorten the 10K operating hours?
Yes. The higher the percentage, the faster you go through the hours of life. It's almost like also, we've got that 24-hour boost mode. And in some cases, there's a thought that, you know, if I need to shock the pool, I'll just hit the boost mode and that should take care of it. I don't recommend doing that because you take 24 hours out of that 8,000 hours by doing that. It's much quicker and easier and more cost effective to treat it manually by adding your liquid chlorine or your trichloric granules or cal hypo to shock the pool instead, rather than using the boost mode. All right. Boost mode, I'd recommend if you've got a party coming up, if you've got bad weather that kind of drop your chlorine level, it's always good to put the boost mode on so that you can bump up the chlorine level for those instances. All right. Rather than using it to shock the pool. All right.
All right. And will the Gen 2 be compatible with AutoPilot Professional?
No. And the reason why is the AutoPilot Professional is a single control box that has control over between 2 cells up to 6 cells. The Gen 2 right now is only capable of controlling a single cell manifold.
That's all for now.
Okay. All right. So let's go to the next screen. If you are working with a heat pump, here's the screen on the heat pump. So again, you can adjust temperatures by the up and down buttons by dragging the icon over here to the temperature desired. We can go from pool to spa mode. We can turn it off heat on units that are heat and cool. We can put it to cool, and we can put it to auto, which basically you set the temperature and it will go into heat or cool automatically. Okay. Tells you the water temperature, tells you if the fan is running or not. In this case, it's showing it's off. The compressor's off as well. So it gives you a good snapshot of what's going on with our heat pumps. Okay. Now, if you've got a project that has the heat pump and a ChlorSync system, even a ChemSync, you only need one pool sync antenna to communicate with all the equipment on that particular equipment set. The PoolSync app also allows you, if you've got multiple customers with PoolSync connected, that on your phone app, you can name each customer's job so that you can pull up their specific job if you have got access to their Wi-Fi, and you can monitor and adjust everything from your phone at your office. So it does save you a lot of time when you work with the PoolSync and sell those to your customers. All right. So are there more questions at this point?
Yes. What's the intention for treating pools over 7,000 gallons?
Over for 7,000 or 70,000?
70,000.
For 70,000 gallons. All right. So with the Gen 2, you can definitely operate it with our largest cell, which is the PPC5 cell, and that will handle up to about 80,000 gallons. When you start getting much more of a chlorine demand than that, we can do multiple cells. All right. So let me see if I've got it. Okay. So the commercial pool systems. This is basically what you'd want to do when you're dealing with the commercial pool systems. All right. We've got the Dig 220. Now, those are in limited quantities right now, but you can use the Gen 2 in place of the Dig 220. The AutoPilot Professional has also made a comeback where we are making limited number of AutoPilot Professionals if you need to do multiple cell systems for much larger than 70,000 gallons or commercial pools. All right. So in a single cell application, this is the PPC5 cell. We do have a manifold that looks similar to this, but with the Gen 2 system, we'll have two of these tri-sensor modules stacked on top of each other. Then on the opposite side, we'll have two of the PPC5 cells that's stacked on top of the other. And this carryover loop will just basically be down at this height instead. All right. So with that application, if you need two cells for a larger body of water, we can still do the Dig 220s, or we can do the Gen 2 ChlorSync units with a 2-cell, 2 tri-sensor manifold. Or we can do the AutoPilot Professional with this configuration to where we have 1 tri-sensor and 2 cells. All right, we can do 2 cells up to 6 cells in this configuration. So we can do very large commercial pools as well with the professional unit. Okay. So that basically covers all the new features, the systems. We're changing to the Gen 2 on the ChlorSync system. We do have the ChemSync available. We do have, for any of the older commercial systems, we do have these available as well. Because we went for a period of time for about a year where we did not have a commercial pool system because these units were discontinued at that time. Basically because of global supply shortages, we were not able to get circuit boards for these systems, and that basically shut down the ability for us to manufacture these units. So after a long period of time, we are able to get circuit boards again for these systems. Okay, so that's going to cover everything I have for today. So at this point, let's go over any questions that you may have, or any concerns you may have, or any.
Yeah, Edwin has a question. He says that he understands that the pool pilot professional has been discontinued.
Right. It is available once again.
It is available again.
Yes.
Okay, and he says or comments, the last time that he requested it, he was given 2 times PPC5 cells.
Okay. Like I mentioned, one of the reasons why we couldn't make it was because we couldn't get circuit boards. So as of last week, I know that we got our first delivery of circuit boards. I believe we received like 60 circuit boards, so that we can make 60 units at this point. Let me go back over here on the cells. There is a difference in the PPC5 cells. The construction is a little bit different, but the internals are all the same. When we're dealing with a single cell manifold, as you see up here, part number is a PPC5. When we're dealing with a multiple cell application, such as this one over here, it is a PPC5. I left out the 5 there, but PPC5 MF. And the MF stands for male and female unions, okay? On the single cell union, you've got a female to female unions on it. On the multiple cell, it's male and female unions, so they attach one on top of the other, and it gives us a little more compact design on the manifold assembly. All right, but they both produce the 2.62 pounds per day of chlorine output. All right. Question?
The cell, that's Jeremias, the cell on one of our customers, the cell went from that chrome plated to copper color. Does that mean that the cell has been damaged?
No, the color of it really doesn't impact it much. All right, because from our manufacturer, what it is, it's a titanium plate, a flat plate. And on the titanium plate, they spray on a coating of what's called ruthenium oxide. The ruthenium oxide is baked onto the surface at a certain thickness, and that dictates how much life the cell has. So there could be color variations on that ruthenium oxide coating, and that's why you may see a shiny area versus a copperish colored cell. But the true indication of the life of the cell when it's getting depleted are the amps and volts that are going to the cell. In the case of the ChlorSync and Gen 2, we're giving you a good idea based on the cell life remaining percentage as to when the cell is going to need replacement. All right, but the color of it doesn't impact it. Okay.
Good. And looks like Craig missed a few slides in the beginning of the presentation. He wants to know if the ChlorSync 2 models are being sold with the manifold style cells, like the Nano Plus, for example.
Yes, absolutely. The ChlorSync Gen 2 is fully compatible with any of our existing systems that has a manifold design. So the Nano Plus, the Soft Touch, the Dig 220, the 75003, which is part of the total control system. Any of those previous models that we manufactured, we can use a Gen 2 on.
That's all for now. Any other questions?
All right. This presentation has been recorded, So if you want to review it all over again, that will be available to you as well. All right, so if there's no other questions, I appreciate your time this morning. I think we have got a very, very good, reliable system to offer you in our chlorine generation systems. And some of the changes that we're making, I think is a great improvement to what we offer. All right. Thank you again. Were there a couple other questions that popped up?
Just about the presentation, how can they request this presentation? And they're also giving you thanks for your time, Sean.
All right. Thank you very much. All right. So with that, meeting is adjourned. Again, thank you very much, and we appreciate your business. Thank you for being our customer.